We're now going to switch to business aviation. We're delighted to have 4 people leading the industry, if they could come up now. We've already heard from Wheels Up. Dan Crowe is the architect as Chief Information Officer of that deal. We're delighted to have Per from Avinode. Avinode has been leading the efficiencies in the business aviation market for a long time. And then we're delighted to have Greg Johnson from OneSky. OneSky is an amazingly, we talk about a stack company. OneSky has stretches all over business aviation. And one of their companies is also Sentient Jet, which was the first company to offer fractional cards. So we're delighted to have Andrew Collins from Sentient Jet. I've just come close, it's fine. If we have less gaps, it's easier for the camera. Okay, Greg, you sat down first, and you don't have a microphone. Could we pass on? When we talk about the business aviation market, we look at, we've seen what Uber has done in the limousine and car hire market. Why is the business jet market more complicated?
I mean, where do you start? But I think that, it's much harder when you're dealing with assets that are not necessarily out there for profit, that you don't necessarily have control of. I think a lot of people miss the fact that this is an industry of aircraft managers that are truly in business to manage aircraft for their principals that own the aircraft, which adds a dynamic that's very different than owning your own vehicle and deciding you're going to make a couple bucks on the side. So that supply side complexity makes it much different.
Dan, you came into the industry from Auto Trader and Weight Watchers. How much more complicated do you see business aviation?
Well, it's just different challenges, right? It's a smaller industry in some ways. There's not really scale players per se. I think that, but there's very strong analogies there. At Weight Watchers, we were providing digital health solutions to literally millions of people as the technology advanced. And in Auto Trader, we tech-enabled automotive retailing, which was very analogous to what we see in charter aviation. So I think the challenges are different, but can be addressed in similar ways. And I think we're coming out of the trough of disillusionment here into the area of enlightenment. And this year, my vote is this is the year. So yeah, the challenges are different but surmountable.
Andrew?
I think that where we are is an interesting spot. You referenced Uber, and I think that the Uber comparison was just as much about driving a financial valuation as it was about the complexities of the industry, right? So as Greg pointed out, that was a business that was built on a commoditized supply chain, right? So it's far more complex, and I do think that's the case. But we're seeing a lot of interesting digital aspects of our business grow. I think it depends on the context to which you're kind of looking at it, but there's a lot that everybody on this panel is doing that's interesting. We're focused a lot on customer experience, and I think if people start there, whether that customer at the end of the day is your end consumer or it's in your supply chain with an operator partner, making it so that it's easy to transact with you is really the first step. And in line with that would be the cleansing of data and making sure that your data is extremely clean. And I think that therein lies a lot of the complexity.
Per, you're a B2B company. Avinode runs a marketplace for charter. What do you see as you launched 10 years ago?
19 years ago.
19 years ago, 10 years, close. I'm rounding. What's changed in that time? What have been the big wins for digitalizing business aviation?
I think that, we started with the idea that it should be as easy to book a private jet as a commercial airline ticket. That's 2001.
And have you
and
accomplished
you still can't, really. It's not the straight-through processing. I think that the overall digitalization, the consumer experience, the phones we carry around, what we encounter in a day-to-day has made it more attractive and enabled a lot of the stuff that's been going on over the last 5-6 years. That we now see that people are finally having digitalized back ends, not running their operation center on a whiteboard Or I had one operator in Europe that had their entire schedule in a binder, and every evening they photocopied it so they had backup if something happened. I mean, it's impossible to create a streamlined through process if that's what people have been working on. But I think a challenge is just setting the expectation and creating context so that everyone is incentivized to be part of it. If the owner doesn't see why they should be reporting when they're available and not, why the dispatcher, if they don't know why it makes sense to put in the data in the correct way, if you are selling a product to an end consumer that you can't deliver, I mean, you need to align the expectations, and then I think that you get the behavioral change. Because at the end of the day, I think the algorithms are probably there, the technology infrastructure is there, it's just everything needs to come together, and the human part is a big component of it, and we see that there is a change now.
Dan, you've got, with Wheels Up, you have your own fleet, and you're increasingly pushing to add other operators and grow using their fleet. One of the problems, I think, in the industry is that there's so many different systems available for the operators, from whiteboards to probably pair? How many flight management systems?
So in total, we integrate with 29 different software, everything from big ones to a homegrown one.
So, Dan, how do you get the business side, the suppliers, digitally enabled?
Well, what we're doing, obviously we have 120 aircraft or so, and we just acquired an operator, as you know, travel management company. Very excited about that. So we need to tech enable them. They're integrated with us. But we also, we have a fleet-centric model that we started with, but we're moving to an asset-light model to complement that, and we see that as a very critical part of where our future lies. And to do that, we need to tech enable the suppliers that are connected to us with that quality data that Andrew was talking about. Then connect it to some pretty sophisticated marketplace technology. You guys all know the challenges in the industry: pricing, feasibility, availability. Get that working, and then provide a fantastic consumer-facing digital experience. I mean, you had asked me the earlier question about these other companies. That's the recipe there too. But getting Avinode, Pair, you guys were pioneers in this. Getting the back end tech enabled is critical, and for our partners, we're going to make that. You saw the Aviation acquisition this morning. Obviously, that's a play to help us connect to operators and get that rich data, help them help us with a great supply chain, so we can use our data science and advanced technology to price it and make it feasible and make it available, and then deliver that consumer experience. And I think we're all endeavoring to do something similar, and it does start with the consumer, as you said, but you need the data and the suppliers there. And the suppliers need to commit to being more technology-centric if they want to compete in a world where broker-operator model is under pressure, and it's a more direct-to-consumer model. I will say one thing. Right now, in the Wheels Up app, you can go in, you can buy a charter flight. Click, buy, and to take the money. It happens every day. $15,000, $20,000, $25,000 flights are bought real time. I mean, it can be done. So to do it at scale requires more technology and more supplier connectivity.
But Dan, when you buy that, is that on a Wheels Up aircraft? So you can do it on a King Air easily, but if I want a G650?
No. That is on light, mid, super mid, and heavy with our partners. So we have some great partners out there, and also we are partnered with Avinode in part. So no, those are off fleet.
Greg, do you see, because you also have your own fleet with OneSky, you've got FlexJet, and you've got and operators. What do you see as the biggest challenge? Is it getting other operators on board? Is it much easier for you dealing with your own fleet?
It's different. Certainly when a pilot duty's on or duty's off and maintenance and things like that, you can make different decisions when it's your own fleet versus a partner fleet. But as an organization, we've been working very closely with a strongly vetted network of operators in Andrew's business and Adam's private flight business, for decades, and those relationships are strong. And our access to those aircraft and our ability to use those aircraft in a way that's productive for all parties, is something that we are very good at. So there isn't one model that's better than another. I think that we're evolving to to a marketplace where the assets can be owned and they can be non-owned, and they kind of work in a hybrid manner together.
Okay, Andrew, what should the customer expect in 2025, 6 years' time?
Look, I think that, Dan mentioned it, you can book a flight today through a mobile app. We spend more time with our handheld phones than watching TV. We've crossed that Rubicon. So in reality, if you look at the growth rate of an on-demand consumer, not a charter consumer, but somebody who's taking in food. Kirsten mentioned Cosmo.com, which was really funny to me, but it was a great point. The incrementality that built the infrastructure that allows for us to now have marketplaces for everything from food to transportation and things like that. I think the consumer can probably expect to have a frictionless or close to friction-free experience within business aviation. I think it's more behind the scenes that's going to drive that. And it's to the last point. In order for that to happen, in order for that to truly work, we have a mobile app, and we've seen $60 million of transactions happen through it, hit the flight calendar without any human intervention. And that's because we have fixed pricing, right? So there's some way that it can be done today. The reality is in order for the consumer to get to that kind of an experience, to get to that context, there has to be data sharing, and there has to be a way that data comes together. And as you see consolidation happen in the industry, there's all sorts of legacy systems that have to combine. And Greg will tell you that he's probably lost some hair over that. I mean, it's a tough road to hoe. But I think at the end of the day, it's really about perfecting that ability to have that on-demand transaction and have a digital experience that you don't even have to think about. Our business, over the years has seen various ways that people have seen, rough spots in it in terms of booking flights and such. And it just seems to me that from a consumer standpoint, not only will dynamic pricing in the background help with that and help the price points, but also help the experience.
Can I augment on that? Totally agree with that. And I think there's another aspect of it, and I've talked to Per and these guys about it too, which is the whole journey. We talk a lot about booking. Let's get the pricing right. Let's make sure the data's there and it's feasible, et cetera, and you can book it. But then there's the whole post-booking experience, right? Let's make sure everyone knows the tail number. Let's say the caterers and the ground people, they're all integrated. The FBO knows. There's a huge opportunity to connect all of that too through various means. So we certainly haven't lost sight of that aspect of it.
And I'll jump on a little bit and say I do think that this next revolution is really more about the supply side than the demand side. What I think we've seen over time is there have been attempt after attempt of somebody to enter the market. They speak a good game about we're going to offer instant online booking and availability. Within a relatively short period of time, they either evolve into a traditional broker or they go out of business. And the
or
fact,
both.
The fact is that they really learn that they need to go sell charter, and they don't have the resources to invest in the back office and in that infrastructure. And we're now at a time period where the larger players in the space are looking at this and saying the time is now. We need to invest in the industry. We need to help connect the dots with the smaller suppliers that we work with on a day-to-day basis. And you're seeing it out of Dan and Wheels Up, and you're going to see things like that coming out of One Sky as well, and that's just where we are as an industry.
It really does feel like in the last 12 months that the large operators, One Sky, Wheels Up, Vista, Global, have all woken up to this. Why now?
I don't think any of us woke up in the past year. I think it's something that we had to get to this point, as an industry, and not for nothing, technology's been evolving in the background. Things have happened that have made it easier. To Per's point, a few years ago, guys were still using whiteboards and whatnot. So the actual operators themselves have started to change. And the fact is, the technology part, the actual writing of the code, is not the hard part here. The part that's really most challenging is getting the industry and the hearts and minds of these operators that we depend on the supply side to start to evolve and start to embrace technology in new ways and sort of take their finger off the button. And we're seeing that evolution happen now faster than it has in the past.
Per?
Yeah, and you also have the aspect of demand and supply and what's available. Here you go, 2010, 2011, you could call any operator and they would basically fly for direct operating costs. They had so little to do, so it doesn't matter how they priced in Avinode, you could always call and get a better price. Volume was also down, so why focus on efficiency and workflow and streamline that if you have enough time to handle everything manual? Now with capacity less and demand up, I mean, all of those aspects becomes much, much more important. And it's amazing if you sit in an operator's dispatch center and look at the manual work behind every single trip. You will be amazed. I know I mentioned it before, but it's not unusual. It's 400 or 500 emails that can easily be exchanged within a department and looking between broker and operator and end client. We see there are 47 distinct touch points for every time someone has booked and before it flies. So there's a lot of inefficiencies, and we of course have a dream that eventually double entry of data, passenger manifest, catering orders, FBO, transportation, all of that needs to be streamlined. It needs to be shared over API between the different platforms.
Do you think the industry should just simplify? At the moment, booking a charter, you can have catering variations, you can have de-icing charges, you can have repositioning charges. If you're booking an aircraft charter for the first time, it's really complicated and scary. You suddenly get hit for de-icing, that's another, $10,000.
But I mean, I think people expect the ability to customize in many cases. I mean, for me, when I make the Uber analogy, it's really like, okay, could I order, instead of an SUV, black car, order a BMW X5 with brown leather interior, Voss sparkling water, and peppermint Tic Tacs, and expect that to be outside in 5 minutes? No. But when you buy a charter for $150,000 to go transatlantic, you sort of expect it. So yes, I think there is a niche where you can standardize, but you also need to be able to cater and set that expectation. Then supplying it and the logistics on the back end, of course, get hard.
Connecting the suppliers of these, not just the suppliers of the lift, but also of these services through common platforms, common data interchange can make all that happen. It'll never be exactly what we're describing, what you're talking about there down to the Tic Tacs, but you can get close. Can I just jump on the why now? I just think the why now is a very interesting question. I feel like people are recognizing what Uber did and how they grew the total addressable market in taxi and limo and what the parallels are to this industry. And I think we're attracting capital investment, and we're seeing an industry that's not at scale, but needs to have some scale players with some serious technology behind them. And I just think we're all seeing that, and that's why this is going to be a very cool year.
Okay, so going back to the question, Dan, 2025, I come onto wheelsup.com, and what's going to be different for the consumer?
Well, it's definitely going to be, and I'm sure that's true for everyone up here, it's going to be a lot closer to the true frictionless digital experience that we've come to expect in all other aspects of our life. You can do everything you need to do, put in, I want to go from here to there, and be presented with an array of options, not just whole aircraft. It could be sharing, it could be hybrid options, all kinds of things. First mile, last mile, all laid out for you, and with a lot more convenience, and then ability to connect all your passengers together. I mean, the possibilities are endless, but there's no doubt it's going to be a far superior consumer experience, a lot more choice, far more convenience, just like you've seen in other industries.
I think simplicity is key here, right? And it's one of the most difficult things to do. So getting it right and simple for both the consumer, but to Dan's point, getting it simple to connect as an operator or a supplier. At the end of the day, you can't take 2, 3, 4 weeks, 6 months, a year to install a system that still has a question to it, right? It's got to be something that can turn on overnight. And again, in order to get to this vision or this 2025, breakthrough, I don't know that it's, big Michael Bay explosions that happen as much as it's, really that simplicity and that user experience just being very clean and easy.
And transparency. I mean, that's something we haven't talked about. But in every other industry, I'll go back to my automotive roots, where the dealer held the cards, now the internet and the web come along, and now the consumer is empowered with data. You're definitely going to see more transparency in terms of price and availability of options than what we've seen in the past.
We've got a question from Slido. What do you see as the key enablers to reduce ticket prices and therefore offer the on-demand aviation industry to a wider market? So I think that's an interesting one. Do you think you'll actually see pricing come down because of technology?
Do you want me to jump in, or you know?
Anyway, I'll start with.
Please, Greg.
I'll take a first stab at that, and I will say I think that there is, and always has been for the past 10, 20 years, this pent-up desire to be able to fly private jet for the price of first class. Right? It's what everybody wants to see happen, but there are some fundamental economics when you take a smaller aircraft and you fly it at exactly the time that you want to go between the 2 points that you want to go to that make that extremely hard to achieve. Now, what we have seen is we've started to see pooling happen in private aviation, and in some cases it works, and in some cases it doesn't. Well, obviously, if you fill every seat and you spread the cost over those seats, you can come up with better economics per seat than if you're flying a plane with 2 people. But that's really the only improvement we've really seen in overall economics, right? I mean, ultimately, the planes are going to cost what they're going to cost, and the fuel and the pilots, if anything, are going to go up. So I don't see step change improvements in the cost to go exactly where you want to go, when you want to go, unless you're pooling your group of people together.
Okay.
So on that, scale. You've got, if you have large markets, very liquid, lots of aircraft, and now we apply all this data science, and you can really optimize across fleets and reduce repositioning, you can get the costs down. You're right, the planes aren't, and the pilots aren't getting any cheaper, no doubt. But I think the whole system could definitely become more efficient. And sharing options are interesting too, and I think they've got some potential.
So following on from that, technology is not going to get the price lower. And I think it's also worth highlighting that a lot of business jet operators have very low margins already. Another Slido question, will technology make the total addressable market bigger? Per?
I think distribution and creating new ways of selling the product will open up the market, but I don't think that we should expect a factor 3, 4, 5, or the comparison that happens to the Uber market or the Uber model. It's interesting to see more and more operators are floating their aircraft. You're getting away from owner, but into owned aircraft instead. That opens up, for a lower price point. In Europe, however, I think that sustainability will be a key driver and something that technology will need to also simplify. I would imagine that in 2025, if you go on a private jet website to book something, the argument for why it's sustainable and how you're offsetting and a click to offset will be front and center. And today, trying to offset the American Airlines flight, it's not easy. It's not part of their workflow. Go to KLM, you click a button, and they will do it for you. Search private jet carbon offsite, and most brokers and operators in the world will pop up. And about us, it says, yeah, we have a program. To date, there's very few that I've actually seen that practice it. So that, especially in your perspective, this is front and center, and it's even to the point where they call it flight shame in terms of trying to reduce the flying overall. So we as a market needs to address that.
I can't believe you're not doing the Swedish word for flight shame.
Flygskam.
Flygskam. UFO. Okay, so we've talked about the environment as a problem. John Clark has asked a question on Slido. Is the pilot shortage a problem? Is technology helping to solve that problem?
I would tell you right now it's not as big a problem for us against our overall business, but it will become a problem if we're not careful. And so from where I sit, I think advances in training, advances in the educational aspects of the business are important. Ultimately, from where we sit, it's also, to Dan's point about infrastructure and about the clarity of infrastructure, getting that duty time right, getting that scheduling correct, all of those things are going to play a role in ultimately the efficiency around crewing and the efficiency around flying. So I think it can have some impact. I don't think it's going to totally solve it, though.
No.
Sorry.
Oh,
Sorry, good.
I was going to say, just to jump on that, I think that there's an awful lot of industry dialogue going on right now about the future of flight training, and we're talking and in discussion with a number of different universities about how that could evolve over time. The legacy model of flight instructing for X number of years to build time really isn't creating better pilots. It's just sort of delaying the time before a potentially good flight crew member has the experience that we need. So I think you're going to see changes there, and technology may play a part in how that happens.
We've got a question from the back.
Yeah, so on this question of the economics, I think it's really, the supply-demand curve is really steep, and I know personally there are lots of times where I choose not to fly because of the cost, and specifically the cost of repositioning. There was an example, I was in Lake Tahoe, had a last-minute meeting that came up in LA, and there were 20 planes sitting on the ground in Lake Tahoe, all with, this was on a weekend. They were all there with their crews. So capital has been committed, the crews have been committed, everybody's ready to go, but there's not a system in place where I can access those aircraft and make the flight. And I guess just getting to this repositioning question and kind of pooling the fleets and making them accessible to people, I think this is really the critical piece to getting the cost down. And the question is, who's going to do that? It sounds like Wheels Up's acquisition that was just announced today can potentially help with that. But as we can make these fleets available, increase utilization and get costs down, to me that's really the exciting.
Any comments?
Well, yeah, I'll jump into that. Yes, that acquisition definitely plays toward that. I think it's about consolidating a supply chain through technology. It could be a virtual supply chain, and then getting high-quality data, high-fidelity data, and applying data science. If you have a virtual network of 2,000 aircraft and you know everything about where they are, where the crew are, what's the schedule, and you can apply the data science and the algorithms to that, you can dramatically reduce the repositioning costs. I mean, that may be the holy grail, but I think we're at the tipping point for that.
Yeah, no, I jump on that and say that we're at a point where I'm sure Wheels Up has this, we've had this for a while, where operators can tell us in those cases where they've got a plane in Tahoe that's sitting, and we then factor that into our sourcing algorithms and would select that aircraft. The challenge is helping those smaller operators deliver that data to us so that we can make use of it. So we've had the ability to consume it and use it in our supply sourcing for a while. The industry is now coming around.
You've just broken the heart of all the charter brokers.
Can I say one quick thing here, though? One thing that we're kind of forgetting about is there's been a lot of people that have done this in the past, and there's a trust factor here, okay? Sharing of data is a really interesting topic in our world, and we haven't really talked about it as much up here. This example of being in Lake Tahoe, that person that just asked the question had more information than 3/4 of the industry just by gleaning the tales that were out there. We share all sorts of data today, but it's extremely fragmented. And so this core issue of what's the motivation for someone who either manages or owns aircraft to share data with you is at the heart of what's going to, push progress ultimately towards where we go. It'll happen. It's just what's the right motivation.
That's right. There's a real psychological divide that we're starting to cross, where in the past the charter operator community was extremely reluctant to share data digitally, right? But what's ironic is that we on the demand side are trusting those operators with our passengers and candidly with their lives. Right, so we're trusting them. They do trust us. They're just it's just there's another leap to saying, gosh, can we kind of open up the pipes when it comes to data? And ironically as well, they're sharing all that data with us anyway. They're just doing it through things like email as opposed to through a platform with APIs.
Right, and we can anonymize that data. We're not looking to get operators' customer data. We just want to know where the planes are and where the crews are, because we want to make the system more efficient, and we want to put our demand and point it at the operator's aircraft and help them make more money. It's that simple.
That's right, and I think now they're ready. 5 years ago, they were not.
And we have APIs to 29 different scheduling software, small and big, and they send us schedule every 15 minutes for the next 180 days. So we know leg by leg where an aircraft is supposed to be as what they have scheduled. And then from there, we try to create a search result that should be as accurate as possible. And the challenge we have is just because an aircraft appears to be available doesn't mean that it really is available for charter. Owner might be away a week, but wants it always available to fly himself from Lake Tahoe to LA. Or the pilots aren't really interested in a pop-up trip. They rather be out skiing. Or there are other things that hasn't been put in. And we launched Takeoff Ready as a B2B Amazon Prime equivalent last year, just as a way to get towards how can you allow now operator to say, not what I have scheduled, but what I want to sell. I think you need to put it into context that the person managing the schedule of an operator, be it the aircraft schedule or the pilot schedule, they need to recognize that they're just not doing this now for themselves. Whatever they put here will be distributed through the entire world. Because we have APIs that brokers and operators can use to power their own web apps and back-end systems. So we do distribute a lot of the data, but important is how do we get it transactionable so that you can actually book on it.
So the economy's up, corporate profits are up, fuel prices are fairly flat, and hundreds of millions of dollars have been raised by Wheels Up and Vista and others. And at the same point with Uber, after they had raised a few $100 million, the industry really was starting to take off for taxi service. Why isn't it taking off in the business aviation market? Why is the market flat right now, and what's it going to take before the market actually starts to grow?
Why are you guys failing?
Thanks, Brian.
Yeah, thanks, Brian. Well, I think, maybe this industry needs to be more consumer focused. Maybe it needs to be more transparent. Maybe we need a big branded player, like you've seen in other industries that can grow it. I think we need to, as an industry, need to become more efficient, like we just talked about with pricing the product better, things of that nature, and make the product more innovative and grow as Kenny calls it, the bottom of the pyramid, make it more accessible to more people. I think the industry, ourselves included, can commit to that and drive growth there. It's not just the same old, same old. It has to be something new and exciting to create growth.
When I came in, sorry.
No, you go ahead.
All right. When I came into the industry, it was very fragmented, right? And that actually opened the door for brokerages and the ability to bring a consumer or demand and demand aggregation together with supply. This is just another iteration of that, right? Which is now it's just the technology layer on top, and it's still fragmented. It's no different than the point I just raised a little while ago, which is we're not sharing information effectively yet in order to make this truly successful. I would argue that if you go into the asset-light world like the Airbnbs and the Ubers and the umpteenth other companies that have raised, it's billions of dollars versus a much smaller context in our industry. So the comparison isn't totally binary, right? It's I wouldn't point to it as a negative or as kind of a failure. I would say that it's surfaced to the point where it's showing that there's a real opportunity here. There's a real opportunity for people to come together to bring about not only stronger revenues and stronger demand aggregation, but an opportunity, I think, in which to be a little more cohesive, whether it's under one big brand or multiple brands. I think that's TBD, but that's how I look at it.
And I just jump on and say, I think consistency in this marketplace historically has been quite challenged. The difference from one aircraft to another, the level of service, what the crews are wearing for uniforms, where they went for training, the level of maintenance and care given to the aircraft has been sort of all over the place. And as we get more digital, those things, there'll be more transparency. There should be better consistency.
We've been cut off.
Yeah, standards that kind of come along with that.
And it's a relatively small market as well, and we have challenging and complex problems to solve. We launched Paynode 4 years ago, and I'm going to relaunch version 2 in end of December, which is to be a payment network for this industry geared to the uniqueness. There wasn't a provider out there that we could use off the shelf, because everyone out there is focused on high volume, low amounts. Whereas in our industry, it's high amounts, low volume. I mean, average transaction, $22,000 versus PayPal, $13. addressable market of 500,000-600,000 charter flights a year versus billions of transactions. So you need to sort of take what's out there and try and twist it, and it just takes them a lot longer. And fragmentation means that people are spending a lot of money on different things, and rather than consolidate around a couple of things. So that is a challenge.
Okay, any more questions from the audience? Okay, if we can put the Slido questions up, we're now going to go quick fire, one each, random order. How do you see operators avoiding a race to the bottom with the information advantage shifting from operator to consumer? Dan.
Oh, thank you for that one. But I'll tell you, I have seen this with my own eyes in automotive, and the auto dealers were asking us the same thing. If the consumers knew how much we paid for the car and this and that, how are we going to make any money? Well, you make money by having a great consumer experience and great service after the sale, and by effective delivery, and it really upped the game for the whole industry. You saw it with the stockbrokers, the ones who were just telling you how much IBM was trading for today on the phone. Would you like to buy 100 shares? Those guys went by the wayside. The ones who turned into wealth managers and advisors and really add value to you, they thrived. I think in any industry, whether it's ours or anything else, there's going to be, the consumer, the information is coming to the consumer, and the providers have to elevate their level of service.
Andrew, nice one. What's more important to you to grow business aviation, electrification of the 19, 30-seat aircraft or VTOL? What are you more excited about?
I'm more excited about lowering direct operating costs. That's what I'm more excited about. So I can't speak to that specific question in the sense that, again, we're up here wrestling around, and I see other questions about, commoditization and operators seeing a reduction in prices. I think the combination of shared information and the lowering of direct operating costs should actually be a boon for operators. That's the way I see it. And quite frankly, the sharing of information should give you higher efficiency, which should command more top line, which ultimately should give you more margin dollars in aggregate and absolute margin dollars. So, but I would tell you that I'm far more excited about more nimble aircraft that can create different business models.
Okay, you answered two there, so that's good. Per, who buys your socks for you? They are great. To be fair, Dan's are also pretty good.
I was going to say, come on.
Okay, Per, what about giving away a free digital FMS to gain access to the data?
So I'll start off saying it's a Swedish brand called Happy Socks. So you can go online and find them. Great. And you, which one? So giving away free FMS software is like giving away free CRM. We're using Microsoft Dynamics today. If Salesforce said we could switch tomorrow and get Salesforce for free, would we do it? And the answer is probably no. Because just because you have a software that you don't pay for, that's not the biggest cost and challenge in changing. It's changing behavior. It's the heart of your entire organization that you're replacing. That takes time. And you really need to have a software that then supports where you want to go. And in many cases, we do see change, but it takes a long time. And some people are used to legacy software and have been running the same software for 25 years. So it's not as easy to go in and just give out software. And it's at times more about the behavior, how they work with their owners, what the expectations that the owners have on charter. I see there was a question about some owners are less open to charter, and yeah, that's a challenge. It's a challenge if you have an owner that only pays for 2 pilots and expects a lot of charter hours, because guess what? That aircraft is not going to be very much available. You need that 3rd pilot, or you're going to burn out your existing 2, and that's no fun. So
okay,
it needs to be a shift in sentiment.
You answered 3. Greg, what range do your customers typically fly? Do you have a typical charter?
I think that's tough, because I think it depends on the mission profile for any given day. We have customers that are globetrotters that are flying Gulfstream G650s around the world, and we have customers that are flying from Boston and Nantucket. I don't think that's an easy.
Okay. Do you think jet sharing will work one day?
So, to me, the challenge with jet sharing is strangers versus people that you know. You're talking about what is typically more of an event. I mean, would you share a limo with people? You know, we do have Uber Pool. That's a very short trip on a, you know, you're spending 15 minutes with somebody you don't know, going from point A to point B. Flying transcon in a jet where not all the seats are the same with strangers is a very different experience than doing that with people that you know. The people that I've seen that really enjoy jet sharing and the use cases, I mean, it's been around longer than maybe people know. The founder of the first jet sharing operation I'm aware of was a company called Flightmaker out of Beverly Hills back in the mid-2000s, a guy named David Janes. And what he said was he went to Bandon Dunes for the weekend, ran into neighbors that were up there. They all flew privately, and he thought it was ridiculous. And then he founded this Flightmaker product so that folks that he knew could kind of group together and not end up flying to the same place at the same time, finding each other at the other end and realizing they wasted money. Those type use cases, flying to a ball game together with a group of alumni, those things all make sense. Strangers getting together on something smaller than an airliner, I think, is a real struggle. So I think there are cases where it works and cases where it doesn't.
I did want to jump in on that. We do jet sharing now, and it works now, and it's exciting. We have more of a group model than a by-the-seat model, but it's just like you're saying, people want to come together with either people they know or people who have a common reason. We're all going to the Georgia-Notre Dame game or whatever it is.
Right.
But that happens now. The technology's there. Honestly, the regulatory could make it a little easier, but that'll hopefully come with time. But I think there's an interest in it, and we can do it.
Okay, nice comment. Just because there are 20 airplanes sitting on the ramp doesn't mean they're qualified for hire. Way different than Uber. Per, will lack of technology in the maintenance sector hold back progress on the end user experience? Yes, no?
I think there are a lot of other stuff that needs to be tackled before that would come into the end user experience.
And finally, we've covered pilot shortage. Will the 2020 ADS-B mandate, this is where aircraft have to be able to send out, broadcast their system for air traffic control, affect the number of business aviation aircraft available on the market? Yes or no?
Not materially.
That's a no.
In the lower segment, yes, we see 20% missing.
Okay, that was a yes. That's all I listened to. Yeah.
Well, all our operators will get there, and we're confident they will.
So, no.
Seen the operators go through things like this before, no.
Great. Thank you very much to this panel. That was great. Thank you.
Thank you.